So for those who aren't familiar with the story of Moses, he's born in a Jewish family, but the Jews are slaves in Egypt. When he's 5 years old, he actually enters the palace of the Pharaoh to be raised by Pharaoh's daughter. He's a very special citizen. Now, Moses, if you can imagine life in the palace, is all your fellow slaves are thinking that you're having a great time, but it might not be that great for you, because it's not that you were born in the palace. You were actually raised for 4 or 5 years hearing the stories and the life history of the Jews. And now you find yourself growing up in a life of privilege, and you probably feel a little bit of pressure. Now, why would you feel pressure? Because it is no secret among your family and friends, and probably the whole Jewish community, that one of our boys is in the palace. And so the expectations that you are going to do something, we've been waiting. This is the great white hope. You are going to get us out of here. You are going to do something. And so Moses is feeling this pressure, but he's waiting. It's very awkward, because the reason that the situation is as it is that the Pharaoh is very afraid that the Israelites are going to revolt and rebel and leave. And so there's this tension, but when Moses is 40, he's had about enough. He knows he's meant for something more than just living in the palace. And so he sees an Egyptian beating an Israelite, one of his fellow Jews, and he actually kills the Egyptian, buries him in the sand. And I believe that he's expecting his countrymen to sort of rally around him. He's starting this revolution. He's taken a huge risk. Well, the next day he sees 2 Israelites fighting with each other, and he says, "What are you fighting about?" And one of them says, "Who made you the prince or judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" In other words, he spoke to Moses with contempt. We have been waiting for all these years for you to do something. We don't even respect you. And so Moses, taking a huge risk for his birthright, I would say his design, what God created him for, took a huge risk. And now he's on the run, because Pharaoh finds out that he's killed someone, and so he has to leave. So he goes to the backside of the desert. He meets a man with a family with some sheep. He basically becomes a shepherd for 40 years, marries the man's daughter. And he, I think, is through. He's through with the public eye. He's through with taking any chances. And so he's out walking the sheep one day, 40 years after he left, and now we enter the story where he sees a burning bush. He comes up to the bush, and God speaks to him in the midst of this bush that was burning but not consumed. And he tells him he wants Moses to go back to Egypt and essentially to liberate the people. And we're going to pick up the story in Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. It says, "Then Moses answered, 'But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to him.'" He's making some excuses. He really doesn't want to go. But then the Lord says to him, "What's in your hand?" He said, "A staff." He throws it on the ground. It becomes a snake. And God starts trying to convince Moses that he actually has power and that he is going to empower him to go back. And we're going to skip up to verse 10. But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." Verse 12, God says, "Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." But Moses says, "Oh my Lord, please send someone else." Moses is just not interested. He has a comfortable life. He took some risks when he was younger. but he doesn't want to take any more. And I want to ask you today, is it possible that you took some risks when you were younger and things didn't work out the way you planned? Maybe you made a stand. Maybe you told people what you believed. You were honest about your faith and it didn't work out. You were ridiculed or you lost something. And now you're more comfortable watching other people take risks or maybe just watching TV. And I want to continue the story here because finally God convinces Moses to go. And in verse 18 of chapter 4 of Exodus, Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt and see whether they are still alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." So he doesn't even tell his father-in-law the real reason he's going. Basically says, I'm going to take a little vacation, going to go see my brothers. Verse 20, chapter 4, so Moses took his wife and his sons and had them ride on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. So he decides now to move the family. Verse 24, at a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah, who was Moses' wife, took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." So God let him alone. And it was then that she said, "A bridegroom of blood," because of the circumcision. Now, this is a passage we don't talk about a lot in church. It makes us uncomfortable. It is not easy to deal with. But the reason I'm talking about this, one of the reasons, is I believe this is one of the only passages that references a surgical procedure in the Scriptures. Being a surgeon, I wanted to sort of meditate on that a bit and see what this might have for us. It also shows that as God is preparing his people, he's preparing Moses to go and deal judgment to Egypt, the judgment starts with God's people. And what I want to do is unwind this a bit and talk about some reasons Moses might not have wanted to do that circumcision, the surgical procedure. Because we sort of read over that, it's uncomfortable, and then we just move on. Well, remember, Moses is sort of coming off the bench after 40 years. He has been comfortable with life as he's known it. Now, he probably learned something about these customs, about circumcision when he was a child. He knew something about it, or perhaps God reminded him recently. And he has decided to procrastinate. He's decided that this is not something he really wants to do. Now, there are some reasons why we procrastinate. There are some reasons why when we feel stress, we either move toward comfort, as in food or TV or something, or we sort of procrastinate and just divert our attention from the important things we need to take care of. And one of them is that if we have relationships that we are afraid we're going to lose or that are at risk, we will generally procrastinate. So the first relationship I believe that might have given Moses some thought would be the relationship with his son. And I can imagine Moses thinking about this and his son saying, "Hey, Dad, have you ever done one of these before?" Have you? Well, no. Son, have you ever seen one? No. Because remember, Moses was circumcised back in Egypt, but he's been out of the culture. This new culture he's in, the Midian culture, they don't circumcise. He's never actually seen one. He's never actually done one. And so what is God asking him here? See, we just think, oh, everyone knows. I mean, how many in the room have done a circumcision? Right? So we got, and then so if we could put ourselves in that situation, I mean, I'm a surgeon. I would be uncomfortable with that without my surgical suite. And even so, it's not my expertise. I'd want to call someone else. Moses was concerned about, we also don't generally operate on our family members. That's something that the medical profession, why? Because it's the risk is too high. You don't want to make a mistake, and we know there's something about when you absolutely don't want to make a mistake, oftentimes that's what happens. We call it VIP medicine. When there's a VIP, a senator, a movie star comes in, what usually happens? Something goes wrong. Why? Because we're so worried about that we don't actually just take standard care of them. We try to do special things, and we don't actually get the job done. So Moses had this relationship with his son that he was concerned with. How about the relationship with his wife? As we see here, she also has some contempt for Moses. She, basically says, this is a bloody custom. Why are you even doing this? She's not happy. First of all, she's probably not happy that they're moving. She's a local girl. She's been in town for many, many years, at least the 40 years that Moses has been there. And all of a sudden, he's packing up the family, putting them on a donkey, and going back to Egypt for, where are we going to stay? Well, I'm hoping we can stay with my brother, but I haven't seen him in 40 years. Right? This is not a pleasant situation. There's some stress here. His wife is going to be looking over his shoulder very critically. So he doesn't want to jeopardize the relationship with his wife. And then there's the relationship with himself. Moses considers himself perhaps a failure. He took a risk back in the good old days when he was younger, but he is just not up for anything that's outside of his comfort zone now. And I wonder about you. I wonder if there's something that is in your life that's a little bit outside your comfort zone. Something maybe God's calling you to do. You haven't done it before, and it's giving you some stress. The thing about this situation that it brings up is that Moses did not want to jeopardize the relationships with these people in his life, his son, his wife, or perhaps even himself. He didn't want to say, I'll never be able to forgive myself if I don't do it right. But he was willing to jeopardize the relationship with God. And when we look at the commandments of God, when we look at what God has said that he likes, basically. See, we don't like rules. Our brain actually reacts against them. We just want to be generally good enough. And how good is good enough? It's what our neighbors are doing. But when we talk about a relationship, we are talking about, God, what's important to you? I don't understand this whole circumcision thing. My family, my wife doesn't really appreciate it here in Midian, but if this is important to you, I'm going to take it seriously. And I wonder if when we think about our relationship with God, are we taking seriously what's important to God? We most of us have a relationship with the rules, with the commandments, with what we're supposed to be doing. But when we talk about relationship, we need to talk about what's important to God. An example I would give is if I come to your house because I want to have a relationship with you, and one of your customs is that people take their shoes off when they come in, and I find that that's inconvenient for me, and I walk in with my shoes on, arguing with you that that's a silly custom, and I don't, a lot of people I know they keep their shoes on, they don't have that custom. The chances that I'm going to have a really close relationship with you are actually much smaller. Because even though I can't explain why that's your custom, it just is. And if I can inconvenience myself and take my shoes off, even if I've laced them on, the chances that I can have a positive, intimate relationship with you, a deep relationship, is much higher. One of the things about this judgment of God beginning with his people is not just in the Old Testament. I want to go to the New Testament. And when Peter and the disciples are ready for judgment. James and John are ready to call down fire from heaven to destroy a Samaritan village because they didn't accept Jesus. At the Last Supper, Peter pulls out a sword. He is ready to go. But what does Jesus say? Peter, Satan is asked to sift you like wheat. And when you've returned, strengthen your brothers. Well, Peter, he was ready to judge. He didn't think he needed any sifting. And those of us who look at this country and want God to start judging people, let's start looking at ourselves. So what happens to Peter? He goes to the high priest's courtyard, and who becomes Peter's judge? A servant girl. Were you with him? No, I wasn't with him. In fact, calls down curses on himself. A little servant girl judges Peter. The culture is judging us. And Peter recognized that he wasn't who he thought he was. And I believe many of us who want to follow Christ are not exactly who we think we are. And we need to start looking at ourselves, taking a good look. I'm wondering, in light of this passage, are there any things in your life that perhaps are important to God, maybe more important to God than they are important to you? A lot of other people do them, so you haven't really thought much about them. But I want to think about that today. And one of the things I want to talk about is what we eat. Now, the medical profession has more disease than it can take care of. But the way that we eat, the lack of exercise in our culture, and it is not just people outside the church. It is people that claim to be followers of Jesus that are not taking care of the temple. I say 11% of people in the United States exercise regularly. 11%. Exercise, if you're looking for something to help your memory, if you're looking for something to help your general overall health, it is incredibly good for the brain. Exercise actually helps produce BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is like miracle grow for the brain. It actually helps your brain cells to grow. It helps your memory. But exercise, like many things, takes some discipline. It takes some effort. Most of us start too vigorously and can't do anything. And so then we just stop. We just quit. I want to talk a bit about also cravings and how so many of us are stuck in our craving for sugar, our craving for junk food. The brain has a chemical. It's called dopamine, and it starts this desire. And you focus on something, whatever your thing is, whether it's ice cream or French fries or Big Macs or whatever it is that is your thing, and you focus on that, and this dopamine continues to fuel this desire. And that's what we actually call stress. Stress, because with the dopamine actually comes the stress hormones. You usually don't get just pure dopamine, just pure desire. And with those stress hormones, what happens? Your heart starts to speed up, right? You go past the ice cream shop, or you go past the donut shop, and your heart, you get a little bit of a buzz. And the only way to make that go away is to go in and get one of those, whatever it is for you, donuts, ice cream. That actually gets worse when we are under other types of stress. So Moses, in this particular situation where he's supposed to do a procedure he's never done, where God is asking something for him, is feeling some stress. He's got a wife who's not particularly happy with him, not wanting to move. He's got a son that's probably not really happy about the whole procedure either. And so he's feeling some stress. And when we are feeling stress, we want our comfort foods, because that promises us that we'll feel better, at least temporarily. What happens under stress is that our long-term goals are forgotten. We bring everything down to the short term, to just making this feeling go away. And I believe that's where so many of us are caught up right now. We have a stress during the day, during the evening, and we have our comforts that we go to. There's a huge problem with not only food, but pornography and anything that seems to hit this dopamine spot in the brain. Unfortunately, none of those things are actually fulfilling. And so one of the techniques that people use to help people with this is to say, okay, next time you're eating that chocolate cake, donut, ice cream, whatever it is, I want you to just think about, are you really enjoying this? Oftentimes we enjoy the first bite. It supplies the dopamine, but we really don't enjoy the rest of it. We're just feeding ourselves because that's just what we do. We have to get rid of that stress. It's pornography. We say, okay, just sit with it a minute. Is this really enjoyable for you? Are you really enjoying this? Because most people admit with their addiction, they're actually not enjoying it at all. It is something they have to do. They simply have to do it because it's just their brain is driving them. I believe that stress is not necessarily evil. It drives us to do those things, and many people blame the devil or who else or McDonald's or some. You know what? Stress, I believe, that feeling when you feel it, the rapid heart rate, the tight stomach, the headache you may get, I believe that's a signal for you to talk to God, which is usually the last thing you want to do when your heart is pounding and you're on the verge of getting what you want. But God is all about relationship. And when we give in day after day to those temptations, to those dopamine surges, those things that are actually unhealthy for our bodies, basically we're saying, God, what's important to you is not important to me. Because what we do when we eat those things and we watch those things is that we say, I am taking my comfort now, and I am loading my future self. Who you want to be in 10 years, that's who you're burdening with what you're eating today. And the research shows that we treat our future self the same way we would treat a stranger, which is generally poorly. So everything you watch, every French fry you eat, you're basically saying, 10 years from now, you're going to have to get rid of that. But somehow we don't really care. But your future self, and I want to take a few minutes and just to stop and think about this, and to have you even reflect on who that future self, who you want to be.